The sound of porcelain against wood cracked through the dining room as my husband set his cup down harder than necessary. The maid stiffened at the corner of the table, her tray balanced in her hands. I tried to keep my eyes on the plate in front of me, but my stomach had already tightened into knots. I knew that sound. It was the warning before his temper spilled. "Do you have any idea," he began, his tone clipped, "how humiliating it was to sit across from Levent tonight with no dinner reservation?" I lifted my head slowly. His face was flushed, not from wine, but from anger he had been saving for this moment. The maid shifted her weight, unsure whether to leave or stand frozen. "It was an oversight," I said quietly. My voice sounded smaller than I wanted it to. "I thought I confirmed the time." He cut across me with a sharp laugh, bitter and loud. "You thought? That's your excuse." His eyes darted toward the maid. "Even the staff in this house pays closer attention than you do." The sting wasn't just in his words but in the way he said them, as if he wanted her to hear. As if he wanted to make sure I was lowered in front of someone else. I felt the maid's eyes brush against me, then dart away. The shame crawled under my skin. My husband wasn't correcting me in private, he was putting on a display. "I'll handle the reservations myself from now on," he declared, leaning back in his chair. "I clearly can't rely on you for something this simple." My chest tightened. My fingers dug into my napkin under the table, twisting it until the cloth burned against my skin. He didn't stop there. He turned slightly, addressing the maid directly. "Clear the plates." His command was sharp, dismissive. She moved quickly, but I caught the hesitation in her steps. She was careful not to look at me again, but the silence between us stretched painfully. When she left, carrying the plates into the kitchen, the only sounds were the faint clatter of dishes and the tick of the old wall clock. My husband reached for his glass of water with a deliberate calm that made the outburst sting even more. He was already done with it, done with me, while I sat there trying to steady my breath. I wanted to speak, to defend myself, to remind him that I was not his employee, that forgetting one detail didn't erase all the ways I kept our life together. But the words never came. They stayed trapped in my throat, swallowed by the fear of making his anger worse. After a long stretch of silence, he pushed back his chair. The scrape against the wooden floor made me flinch. Without another word, he left the dining room. I sat alone at the table, my appetite gone, staring at the crumbs left behind. The humiliation was worse than the argument itself. I could have endured his criticism behind closed doors. But in front of her? In front of the maid who dusted our shelves, polished our floors, and now carried the weight of my disgrace in her silence? That was something different. Something deliberate. Later that night, I walked down the hallway, the lights dimmed to a soft yellow. I passed the kitchen on my way upstairs. The maid was there, wiping down the counter. Her shoulders tensed when she noticed me. For a brief second, our eyes met. And in that moment, I saw it, hesitation. Not pity, not indifference, but a flicker of something else. Something closer to guilt. She looked away quickly, lowering her head as though she had done something wrong. I stood there longer than I should have, watching her hands move quickly over the surface of the counter. My chest tightened again, but this time with a different kind of weight. It wasn't just my husband's anger that unsettled me. It was her expression, like she knew something I didn't. When I finally turned away, climbing the stairs to our bedroom, I couldn't shake the image. The tray in her hands, her lowered eyes, the guilt she couldn't hide. Lying in bed, I replayed the evening in my head. His anger, the public humiliation, the way her gaze flickered with something unsaid. I stared at the ceiling until the darkness blurred into morning. One thought clung to me through the night, refusing to let go. Why did the maid look at me as if I was the one who didn't understand what was really happening in my own house? What does she know that I don't? The next morning, I lingered in the kitchen longer than usual. My husband had already left for work, his schedule conveniently packed with back-to-back meetings. The house was quiet except for the soft clatter of dishes as the maid, Ayla, worked at the sink. She noticed me standing there, her hands pausing for a moment in the soapy water. Her eyes darted to mine, then quickly back down. That same flicker of hesitation from the night before returned, and I knew I couldn't ignore it. "Ayla," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Sit down for a moment." She hesitated, then slowly wiped her hands on a towel. She lowered herself into a chair across from me, eyes fixed on the edge of the table rather than on my face. "I want to ask you something," I began. "Last night, when the words caught in my throat. I hated repeating them, hated giving them air. Oh, when he spoke to me like that. You looked at me in a way I can't forget. Like you knew something. Do you?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment I thought she would stay silent. But then, in a low voice, she said, "It wasn't the first time, was it?" I froze. She looked up briefly, then back down again. "He's spoken that way before. To you. Sometimes louder, sometimes quieter. Always when he thinks I'm not listening." My chest tightened. You've heard him?" Ayla nodded. "I don't want to interfere. It's not my place. But I can't stand by when I see you hurt." Her words sank into me like stones. I had told myself for months, years, that the scoldings were private moments, that the closed doors meant secrecy. But she had heard. She had witnessed more than I wanted to admit. I sat back in the chair, trying to steady my breath. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because," she faltered, her hands knotting in her lap. "Because he told me not to. He told me I should never repeat what I hear in this house. And her voice dropped to a whisper. "I need this job, madam." The shame twisted into something else, anger. Not at her, but at him. He had silenced her as easily as he silenced me. I leaned forward. "Did he ever say anything else to you? Anything about me?" Ayla hesitated. Her fingers tightened on the towel in her lap. "Only once. He told me that I shouldn't feel sorry for you. That you don't deserve pity." The words hit me like a slap. My throat burned. "He said that?" She nodded. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The weight of it hung in the room, heavier than any silence I had ever known. My husband hadn't just lost his temper, he had deliberately poisoned the air in my own home, turning even the maid's sympathy into something forbidden. I thanked Ayla quietly and told her to continue her work. She nodded and slipped out of the room, leaving me alone with a head full of questions that didn't stop multiplying. What did he mean? That I didn't deserve pity? Was there something he believed I had done? Or was this just another way to strip me of dignity, to rewrite the narrative so that even the witness of my humiliation would doubt me? The rest of the day passed in a haze. I tried to distract myself, organizing the bedroom closet, answering half-hearted emails, but the conversation gnawed at me. By evening, when I heard the garage door open and his car pull in, my body tensed on instinct. He walked into the house as if nothing had happened. His jacket came off, his tie loosened, his phone buzzing in his hand. He kissed me on the cheek, perfunctory and cold, then poured himself a drink at the bar. "You didn't forget the dry cleaning, did you?" he asked casually, not looking at me. I shook my head. "No." "Good." He sipped his whiskey and scrolled through his phone, as if the night before had been erased. But it wasn't erased. Not for me. His cruelty, Ayla's confession, the realization that my humiliation wasn't accidental, it all circled in my head, tightening into one pressing thought. He wasn't just lashing out in anger. He wanted me diminished, watched, controlled. And then a bigger, darker question formed, the kind that kept me awake long after he fell asleep beside me. If his humiliation was deliberate, what else was he hiding behind it? What secret was my husband protecting by breaking me down in front of others? The days that followed blurred into a routine I no longer trusted. My husband carried himself as if nothing had changed. He left in the mornings with his leather briefcase, returned at night with short remarks about business dinners and boardroom politics. To anyone else, he was the picture of stability. To me, every smile, every casual word, was a mask. I couldn't stop thinking about what Ayla had said. "He told me you don't deserve pity." The phrase gnawed at me, twisting itself into new meanings with every repetition. Why would he need to say that to her? What story was he trying to plant? On the third evening, after he had gone upstairs to take a shower, I walked into the kitchen. Ayla was finishing the dishes, the sound of running water and clinking plates filling the silence. I waited until she turned off the faucet before speaking. Ayla, I said softly, has he ever told you anything else about me? Anything I should know? She froze, her hands still wet. Her shoulders tensed, and for a moment I thought she would refuse to answer. Then she reached for a towel, drying her fingers slowly, as though buying herself time. There was one thing, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. He told me not to trust you. My stomach dropped. Not to trust me? Why? Her eyes flicked up to mine, wide with fear. He didn't explain. He just said you sometimes make things up. That you exaggerate. He said if you ever asked me about him, I should ignore it. The words stung more than I expected. It wasn't just humiliation now, it was sabotage. He had laid the groundwork to make me look unstable, even in my own home. I leaned against the counter, gripping its edge to steady myself. Ayla, when he told you that, how did he seem? Angry? Calm? She hesitated, then shook her head. Calm. Like it was part of a plan. Her answer chilled me. Calm was worse than angry. Calm meant thought out. Deliberate. That night, as I lay beside him in bed, the memory of her words kept me awake. He shifted easily into sleep, his breathing even, while I stared at the ceiling in silence. He had scolded me in front of her not because he lost control, but because he wanted her to see me reduced. To see me as someone not worth respecting. But why? What was he covering for? The next morning, I searched through the study. I told myself I was looking for answers, but really I was looking for proof. Proof that my instincts weren't betraying me. His desk drawers were locked, but the lower cabinet wasn't. Inside, neatly stacked, were household bills, insurance forms, and maintenance receipts. All ordinary. But then, behind the folders, I found a thin envelope. It wasn't addressed to me. The handwriting was sharp, unfamiliar. I pulled the letter out carefully. The paper was creased, as though it had been read many times. I unfolded it and scanned the words quickly. It was a woman's handwriting. Formal, precise. She was thanking my husband for arrangements, noting that she appreciated his discretion and that she would remain available until matters were concluded. No names. No specifics. Just vague phrases that hinted at something I wasn't supposed to see. My throat tightened. Was it an affair? A business deal? Something worse? I shoved the letter back into the folder when I heard his footsteps upstairs. My hands shook as I closed the cabinet and straightened the papers. He couldn't know I had been there. Not yet. That evening, I watched him more carefully than before. The way he loosened his tie, the way he poured his drink, the way he avoided my eyes when he asked about my day. Every movement felt rehearsed, as though his entire life with me had become a performance. Later, when he finally left his study to take a phone call on the balcony, I crept inside again. The envelope was still there, untouched. But now I noticed something I hadn't before, the faint indentation of handwriting on the back of the letter. As though another sheet had once been pressed against it while being written. I traced my finger over the marks, my pulse quickening. This wasn't just a letter of thanks. It was connected to something else, something bigger. I slipped the envelope back, heart pounding, and returned to the hallway before he came in. I tried to calm myself, but the question I had been circling all along now sharpened into a single, terrifying thought. If he was building a lie about me inside our own home, then who was he protecting outside of it? Who was the mysterious woman behind that letter, and why did my husband need me silenced to keep her secret? The next morning, I couldn't sit still. The letter gnawed at me, its vague phrases echoing louder than any argument ever had. I waited until my husband left for the office, his car disappearing down the street, before I confronted Ayla. She was dusting the shelves in the living room when I called her over. "Do you know who wrote that letter?" I asked. She froze, feather duster in hand, her eyes flicking nervously toward the hallway. Letter. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Don't pretend you don't know. The one in his study. Written by a woman. Who is she? Ayla's lips parted, then closed again. She looked cornered, like an animal deciding whether to fight or flee. Finally, she whispered, she came here once. I wasn't supposed to see her, but I did. My breath caught. When? 2 months ago. He told me she was a business partner, that I wasn't to mention her. She stayed only a few minutes. She gave him an envelope and left. I never saw her again. I pressed. What did she look like? Ayla hesitated. Well dressed. Not young, not old. She carried herself like she owned the room, even though she barely stepped inside. She wasn't casual. She was someone who expected to be listened to. Her words only deepened the knot in my stomach. Whoever this woman was, she wasn't just another colleague. And my husband's secrecy wasn't about shame, it was about control. That evening, when he returned home, I tried to watch him with fresh eyes. He was his usual polished self, loosened tie, whiskey in hand, casual talk about market shares and contracts. But every movement seemed designed to keep me at bay. I couldn't shake the thought that the humiliation in front of Ayla was never about me. It was about building a version of me no one would believe, should I ever start asking the wrong questions. And now I had asked them. After dinner, when he disappeared into his study, I followed quietly. The door was slightly ajar. I stood in the hallway, listening. His voice was low, careful, almost reverent. Yes, it's taken care of. She doesn't suspect. Not yet. My heart pounded. I stepped back before he could catch me, retreating silently into the bedroom. The walls suddenly felt like they were closing in. She doesn't suspect. Those words twisted in my head. He wasn't talking about work. He was talking about me. The next morning, I made my choice. While he was in the shower, I slipped back into the study, took the letter, and tucked it into my bag. If he was protecting someone, I needed to know why. And I couldn't discover that by staying silent any longer. 2 days later, while he claimed to be at a late business dinner, I followed him. My hands were clammy on the steering wheel, my heart racing each time his car turned down another unfamiliar street. He parked in front of a quiet, discreet building, no signs, just a polished glass entrance. I stayed far enough back not to be seen, watching as he stepped inside. Minutes later, she appeared. The woman Ayla had described. Immaculately dressed, hair pulled tight, moving like she had somewhere more important to be. She didn't linger, just handed him a folder, exchanged a few words, and left as quickly as she came. I should have felt relief. It looked like business. It could have been business. But the way he tucked the folder under his arm, the way he scanned the street before walking back inside, it wasn't the behavior of a man with nothing to hide. I gripped the steering wheel, the air in the car suffocating. The humiliation, the secrecy, the way he had rewritten me in my own home, it was all connected. But to what? That night, I confronted him. I know about her, I said. My voice was steadier than I felt. He looked at me, his face unreadable. Her. The woman. The one you meet in secret. The one who writes you letters. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he gave a small, humorless smile. You think you know, MIA. You don't. And you never will. The finality in his voice was worse than any confession. It wasn't a denial, but it wasn't an admission either. It was a wall. I stared at him, realizing for the first time that the man in front of me was no longer someone I knew. He had built an entire world in shadows, and my humiliation was only one piece of his strategy to keep it hidden. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply walked upstairs, packed a small bag, and left the house that had never truly been mine. When the door closed behind me, I felt something break, but also something mend. For the first time in years, the shame wasn't mine to carry. Still, as I walked into the night, the image of that woman's face burned in my mind. The letter in my bag felt heavier than it should have. I had taken back my voice, my dignity, my choice. But one question remained, sharp and merciless. Was his betrayal about me at all, or was I just collateral in something larger I couldn't yet see? I left him that night. But deep down, I knew, the real secret hadn't even surfaced yet.